Before we begin, thank you very much to a one-off gift for Christmas for joining the Patreon campaign. You know, I do appreciate that. That's actually very nice of you. I didn't anticipate anyone using Patreon to send me a Christmas gift, but thank you. I really do appreciate that. I have a throne specifically for that because I don't want another Unicron incident, but I suppose that's a way of circumventing it, isn't it? But I do appreciate that. Thank you very much. I actually looked at my Patreon numbers and like, oh my God, we're like less than $10 away from the 4-digit goal, which means Rushed Review comes back as YouTube Shorts, and I'm going to start trying to work in cartoon reviews again, which might actually start soon, as I may or may not be finishing up a script for something Transformer related that's also great to make fun of. So keep an eye out. Yeah, I can't believe we're that close. Thank you so much. All right. Video time now. Now, obviously, I'm here in the toy shop where my brain just kind of stares at everything on the wall and kind of goes, well, this and that might actually make for an interesting topic. I haven't discussed this or this aspect of Transformers, so we're going to do something a little bit different today and talk about something that's actually quite rare in Transformers, but it's common pretty much everywhere else in action figures today, and that is the Build-A-Figure. Now, Build-A-Figures have 3 reasons for existing, and it varies depending on what they actually want to accomplish with said Build-A-Figure. The first reason is, well, you've got a character that is generally too large to sell at any other scale because, of course, like sometimes these action figure lines only get one size in order to run. So like with Marvel, if they want to do a Hulk figure that's actually in proper scale, then it's usually run as a Build-A-Figure, though these days are a little bit more willing to just sell a big figure as just like a solid wave case. But it's still common. You know, here McFarlane's DC line, they did a horse. A horse for Batman to ride. Because how else are you going to sell a DC Comics horse? Yeah, I get that. The second way Build-A-Figures are used is to release something that otherwise would not possibly sell on its own, and yet it is definitely desirable to a certain area of collectors. With the wrestling Build-A-Figures or like WWE, that is generally managers and wrestlers. You know, characters who generally on their own aren't really things that kids are going to go, oh, cool, I want a Paul Heyman figure. I want an Earl Hebner figure. Who cares? But if you've got a wrestling ring play set and you've got 2 wrestlers, you need a referee, so Build-A-Figure it is. That's a clever way of using it. And then the third and the real reason any Build-A-Figure line exists, to make sure you buy an entire wave. To incentivize buying literally every figure they put out, because really, what chance does Blue Marvel and Madam Hydra have of selling on their own if you didn't have to buy them to get those legs? So that's really what a Build-A-Figure is. It's to make you buy a lot more than you plan to. Transformers has done Build-A-Figure exceptionally rarely. And if you look on TF Wiki, it'll tell you the very first example is Transmutate from the Beast Wars 10th anniversary line. Now, the anniversary line was already great because you got updated and upgraded cosmetics on classic Beast Wars toys and characters. And to this date, it's actually some of the last time some of those molds were issued in the US, as during the recent anniversary reissue run, many of those molds were no longer available, either being lost or too degraded to use. But every one of them, up until the last wave, Primal and Megatron, came with a piece of Transmutate, a character who is pretty well remembered amongst Beast Wars fans because it's a very meaningful episode. However, how are you going to sell Transmutate on her own? She has no alt form. She's not the most pleasant looking thing, and that's entirely by design. What do? So Build-A-Figure in this case is actually a perfect solution. Unfortunately, the figure itself is far from perfect. It's very low on articulation. It is quite fragile in some spots. And the legs are made of such a soft plastic, they actually can't hold up the figure over a long term. Finding one of these that is still able to stand up without a support stand of some kind is actually kind of rare. And generally, yeah, since it's the only representation of this figure, this character, it's actually really rare. Go check eBay. It's kind of absurd. However, despite this, TF Wiki is technically wrong. For a main Transformers line, yes, this is the first Build-A-Figure. However, there are other ways Transformers has tried Build-A-Figures in the past, and the main one is the SCF line. I believe it's Super Collectible Figurine. I believe that's the abbreviation. I could be wrong. However, it doesn't matter in this case. SCF is a line of little PVC figurines that was sold blind boxed in Japan. And later waves started including additional bits so that if you got every figure in the wave, you could build an extra figurine. Usually of a Citybot, well, always of a Citybot figure that otherwise was too expensive to sell on its own. The very first one being Fortress Maximus. You'd think that might be a weird spot to start, because you typically think start with like Omega Supreme, start with Metroplex, they came first. Keep in mind, Fortress Maximus was a leader character in Japanese G1 fiction, so it makes sense that he takes priority. These came in two variations. You got a solid painted one and an all clear one. And Fortress Maximus himself is extremely rare because his parts were only distributed in two for every 10 cases, or 1 in every 5 cases actually had Fortress Maximus parts, making it very difficult to actually build the entire figure. But if you did, you got like the first like tiny representation since Headmasters Jr. You know, it was kind of a cool thing. They continued it with Metroplex, who I guess if we're sticking to Citybots is the most logical next step into things. And again, clear variation, but this time these were much easier to find. About 4 in every 5 cases had these parts, so it was actually rarer to not get a hold of him. So that was an improvement at least, and I think that continued pretty much for the rest of this run. So continuing on, the next one, Black Zarak. Not Mega Zarak, Black Zarak, which is admittedly an interesting choice because you would think Zarak, our Scorponok, actually would take priority since he was also a leader character in Headmasters. Don't know why they jumped to Black Zarak, but you know what? I don't mind it either. Again, 2 different variations, though this time they came with a much smokier plastic in the translucent version. I should note, when I say like these translucent versions, usually I just mean the unpainted one, because most of these were just clear plastic, the clear PVC plastic, let's make that clear. It wasn't fragile. Entirely covered in paint. So what you're basically getting is just an unpainted version of the exact same figure on the left. We continue this on. Grand Maximus got his round because even this line was not above repaints, though they did a little bit of retooling for him. They also realized, hey, we can't do a clear figure again, can we? Okay, so let's go with this kind of like worn iron, kind of pewter look to it, which I actually kind of like, and it kind of harkens back to like lead figure, like either lead or metal figurine collecting. It's got a nice aesthetic to it. I actually prefer it over the clear because you can actually see detail on them. The Build-A-Figures for this line actually ends off with Mega Zarak with a very funky looking head, trying to split the difference between animation model and toy model, and I don't think it hit either one very well. I do really like its pewter version. That actually looks pretty cool if I'm gonna be honest here. So that's where the bulk of Build-A-Figure existed in Transformers, and this is all early 2000s stuff, so this definitely predated the 2006 anniversary line for Beast Wars. Now, you might say, well, maybe TF Wiki meant the very first American released Build-A-Figure for a Transformer. You'd still be wrong, because SCF actually did come to America in the form of Heroes of Cybertron. This was, I believe, a Walgreens exclusive line. It was one of those like 3rd level retailer exclusives. You know, the same people who get Authentics now. And they weren't shown in package, but you can see, like above Perceptor, collect all 6 parts to build Fortress Maximus. Toy lines like this are an easy way of keeping a hold of trademarks, by the way. Any figure that's really easy and cheap for Hasbro to release and sell, it's mostly just to keep the trademarks alive. But hey, nice little G1 figurines at a time when G1 really wasn't very well represented. So you got a little bit of something for your nostalgia at the toy shelves. So we did have Build-A-Figure before Transmutate. After Transmutate, it's actually been exceedingly rare, and strangely enough, the only place we've actually gotten it has been the deluxe line of kids cartoon toy lines like Cyberverse, who gave us Macadam. It's interesting to me that the budgeted deluxe toy line is actually the one that comes with genuine, like, classic styled Build-A-Figure. And this is technically the first time that they would do something I would call a figure. You know, Transmutate is great, but the super low articulation generally has me just calling her a figurine. She is not much of an action figure. Macadam, though, ball joints on all the most important spots, has an accessory. He's an action figure. And not a bad one, not a bad representation. The weird thing about the implementation of Macadam's Build-A-Figure parts is it's not over the course of an entire wave that was immediately available at retail. You had to wait like 6 months or even longer before all of the parts were actually released, which is not typically Hasbro's strategy when it comes to Build-A-Figures. They do Marvel Legends, for instance, you know, of course, Marvel Legends gets to do 6, 7 figures in one wave, whereas, this line is lucky to get, 2 or 3 deluxes out in the span of like 3 months. So I understand how slow it is to produce, but it does incentivize you to keep paying attention to the series, and, the deluxes themselves aren't bad toys. The Build-A-Figure is just cherry on top at that point, especially if you really like the character, and Macadam was a cool character. And that did continue. Of course, the most recent one we have is Mandroid in the new Earthspark Deluxes, following the exact same trend and pattern. Mandroid is a much smaller Build-A-Figure, but then again, he's a human character amongst robots, so I think I get why. It's not a bad figurine. I'm using this as just a visual example because there's no like stock photo of the completed Mandroid. But you get the picture here. You get the picture here. They were at least good enough to actually include alternate parts. Like, they know Mandroid for a good chunk of the season only had one Transformer arm attached to him. Later on, he gets another one. So you actually have alternate left arms, which I think is a pretty cool small inclusion that they made. So officially, that pretty much ends what Transformers has done with Build-A-Figure. However, it does open up possibilities because there's plenty of directions Hasbro can go if they wanted to start running Transformers the way they run their other toy lines. Because Build-A-Figures really do help get entire waves of toys sold. It helps avoid shelf warmers. And we know here among Transformer collectors, that's a big thing. Shelf warming, that's a big thing with Transformer people, so you got to avoid it somehow. So, where else do they go? Like, let's presume that after Legacy, they do a toy line that allows them to do a Build-A-Figure. Who gets included? Even if it's not traditional like Marvel style, where we're dumping it all in wave 1, what if it is like spread across 2 waves? Because Transformers does waves of 4 figures. Across 8 figures, you can get 8 parts distributed. So, who's available? The first one that comes to mind is Autobot X. Because how else are you going to do it? It's the center of an entire episode of G1. We've got DevCon at retail now, and that is a character who only appeared in 1 episode. We have Skids, who has gotten multiple toys. He makes very brief appearances in G1 and has exactly 1 line of dialogue. So I think Autobot X I mean, I think it's noteworthy enough in order to actually figure out some way of getting it out there. And a Build-A-Figure is absolutely perfect because there's no way you're going to figure out a transformation for this. And there's no way you're going to figure out a repaint or a retool out of it. You know, unless you troop build like a zombie former or something, which I guess around Halloween would be cool. But really, we've seen what the troop builder packs do. They kind of linger at stores. So maybe not the best of ideas. Build-A-Figure is probably the best way of actually getting Autobot Spike into the world. And I don't think it'd be terribly expensive because he doesn't need to transform either. Something else that came to mind. If I'm thinking like iconic Transformer imagery and characters that can't actually or don't need to transform, what about this thing? So, for Marvel Transformer fans, this is one of the most memorable and iconic pictures from the entire run. This horrific mashup of Megatron and Ratchet fused together into this barely functioning mechanical nightmare. This is a pretty big visual and a pretty well-remembered one from the original Marvel run. And again, there's no way this thing's ever transforming. So again, Build-A-Figure. It's basically the only way I can figure out how to do it. And yeah, I mean, it's horrific. I'd buy it though, because it really is that memorable. It's kind of a huge moment. But here's the funny thing. The big reason why, back in the day, when Marvel and Hasbro were doing Build-A-Figure so regularly, it was asked of Hasbro, would Transformers ever do Build-A-Figure stuff in their lines? And the answer was basically, well, the figure has to transform. You know, we're not going to release this is back in the day when they said, like, we're not releasing a Transformer in the main line that can't transform. So what do? You know, we can't make a figure that comes in pieces, you put together, and it actually has enough engineering in it to transform. That's not feasibly doable. We have an entire line of those now. Well, an entire subset. Junkans are pretty much the perfection of this idea. Yeah, they can be broken up into lots of different pieces to armor up your other figures, but when you put them together, they can actually transform without part forming. This is Build-A-Figure. This is perfect Build-A-Figure fodder. I would even be okay if, like, the first two waves of whatever's after Legacy just repaints one of the Junkans just to get it started, just to get the idea out there. It's perfect. We've proven that the engineering is possible. You know, and it looks like the new armorizers are going to be able to do the same exact thing. So we know it's something they can repeat. I think this is perfect. And here's the thing. Even if you kind of go away from what Hasbro said previously, even previous weaponizers work for this, and in fact could potentially work better. You imagine something like, Six Gun or this guy. When they break up into parts, they form weapons that smaller Transformers can use. So instead of just having a Build-A-Figure, you have a figure that can actually be accessory weapons for the toy it comes with. So you're not just stuck with a useless leg or arm that you don't really want. If you only want one character out of the wave, you're not stuck with this extraneous part that has no purpose with the figure. There's things to do with it. You can add it into the toy as play value. It's a missile rack. It's a huge cannon. It's a rifle, whatever. It gives you possibility, right? And I figured it out. I figured out the perfect way to implement this in Transformers. I figured out the perfect place to put Build-A-Figure parts. Wave 1. Retailers always overbuy Wave 1 because they're excited to get new package, new look Transformers out on a shelf. Clear out all the old junk, put a whole new wave up, a whole new toy line, because they know the new toy lines are going to move better than just new stock of the old stuff. So you always end up with a glut. You always end up with a glut of figures nobody is buying. How long did we see bulkheads in the Voyager price point? How long did we see skids and RC clogging up the shelves? Not every figure in Wave 1's going to be a winner. So you need something to incentivize buying all of them. Build-A-Figure. It's right there. You just have to do it. You don't even have to do it across 2 deluxe waves. You can throw them into the first wave 1 of a new line is the only time when Deluxe, Voyager, and Leader classes all tend to line up on release dates. So you can spread a figure across 1 Leader, 2 Voyagers, and 4 Deluxes and get the entire thing out in wave 1. That helps sell off your overstock, keeps the product from shelf warming, keeps it from having a glut later on. Of course, there's still figures aren't going to sell, but you're going to sell more of them because you got to have the full figure, right? You're not just going to have a character with only 1 arm and 1 leg, but the rest is all there, right? So, perfect place. So, right now, I think Transformers is poised at a spot where, yeah, we could absolutely get away with this if Hasbro's willing to actually go for it, which, admittedly, maybe not. But those are the thoughts. That's the past and the future of Build-A-Figure in Transformers. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And as always, I will see you next time.
We parlay with the captain.
You think a werecroc is going to listen to elvish rules of piracy?
Of course it would be the freaking elves that invented parlay.
I had to think of a quick replacement for the French.